Hello, and welcome back to the Obojima Podcast. My name is Jeremiah, and I'm with Ari and Adam. We are the writers of the Obojima Podcast, and you are joining us for a very special podcast episode, number 50. We've been doing this for over a year, right? That is crazy. What a time.
That's crazy.
I remember, looking back on it, all of us being like, are we going to do a podcast?
I was the naysayer.
Ari was the naysayer. I wasn't going to throw you under the bus.
Convincing.
I wasn't going to throw you under the cat bus. Look at that. On brand. But this is the 50th episode.
Bum, bum, bum.
And so we're going to do something slightly different. We are going to reflect on what we've done. Adam and I kind of did this. We kind of looked back at the mistakes we made, or maybe things that we wish we could have changed, or things that we're looking forward to in the future. But Ari wasn't there for that. So maybe we'll talk with Ari about some of the things that he really likes about the book, some of the things he wishes he could have changed, things that maybe he wrote and then we had to cut for space that he wished made it in. And then after that, we're going to jump into some Q&As. We have, I think, like 10 or 12 questions we wrote down. And it's just talking about, some hyper-specific things, answering some, I think, questions the community might want to know about. And then we kind of go from there. And then if we still have time left...
Rambling time.
Who knows? Rambling. Yeah. I doubt we'll have time left. We ramble a lot.
We do. So,
that being said, Av and I talked about this, but I'd love to hear some of Ari's thoughts on, like looking back at the book. We were just talking off camera about how you have... your physical copy of the book. We don't have a lot of them in stock, right? We got some of them shipped over and the team has them, but we were looking through it. When you look through that book, what are some of the things that you look at and you're like, oh, I'm really happy with how this turned out? And what are some of the things you're like, oh, I wish I could have put more into this, or I wish collectively we could have put something more into it? And Adam, you're more than welcome to jump on there too. I know we've talked about it, but you and I can't shut up.
I think things that I really enjoyed, at least I remember initially, I think the first thing that we kind of sunk our teeth into after our first talks was the descriptions of ingredients, like going through and writing up the ingredients. And that really helped me get a sense of the place. Like, what is the tone? Like, what is this? What kind of ingredients would be found here? Having fun with the types of ingredients, and then seeing them all together in the book and the illustrations for each ingredient. Yeah. First of all, it's bonkers that they're all illustrated. Like, it is quite an undertaking. Not to mention all the ingredients, and then all the potions are all illustrated.
Yeah.
And so, like, seeing all that was really cool. Just like see that all come together. I love NPCs. I think some of the most fun to work on were the harpies. They're just when I'm gonna run my Obojima game, it's gonna include them. They're a ton of fun.
Well, I think your harpies made me care about harpies in general. I also think they made harpies feel more important in Obojima. Although the ones that you wrote for the airfield are unique in the sense that they they have fighter pirate jackets, and they're smoking, they're playing cards, and they have, this, kind of use unique quirks. We're now introducing them. We introduced them in other parts of other adventures, and they have become, I think, more of a Obojima staple monster, just because of your ideas and concepts on those. And I love them. I love that. We just wrote 2 named harpies are in the, the upcoming free RPG Day adventure for this year. And they're super fun. Talking about stuff we had to cut. I had to cut one of the characters that Adam wrote, and it made me sad.
Oh, yeah.
There was 3 of them. There was a trio, and I made the dumb mistake of having 2 harpies illustrated. And then I was like, they're not a trio anymore.
One is now
gone.
Yeah.
I love your harpies. Some of my favorite, when I think Obojima, they're iconic in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were just a ton of fun. Another thing that added just more dimension in my mind to what Obojima is, and the types of, I say monsters, but the types of things you encounter here. In terms of things I wish we could spend more time on, I think there's the region of the map. I think we might have talked about this before, but the region of the map that probably deserves more attention, and I hope we get to do more of it in the future, is the Gale Fields. It's in the center of the island. We kind of describe it as this wild place. We know that it's had some significance in earlier the old Nakudama society, and it would be great to kind of just dig into that a little bit more and just what is it like to adventure there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always felt like the Gale Fields is like sort of Lost World
Yeah,
kind of vibe.
yeah.
You know, like you get the giant sort of Pleistocene looking plants and like giant dragonflies and, you know, centipedes and kind of spooky stuff. But you could also get like, I don't know, if dinosaurs were ever going to come to Obojima, that would be the place they would come. But
Yeah, I think the Gale Fields has like a lot of things in Obojima, has a duality where I think it fits really nicely in the middle of the Gift of Shiratashi and the wetlands, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like the wetlands are really dangerous and the Gift of Shiratashi is really cute and fuzzy and warm and cool. And the Gale Fields in the center are like, you get those picturesque Howl's Moving Castle field full of daisies.
The tall grass.
And
right?
you get the tall grass.
Yeah.
And then you also get howlers in bands hunting sheep dragon and attacking, you know.
And you get like the Courier Brigade outpost. I think there's a big headquarters there. There's also like the possibility that was where the Nakadama Empire,
Yeah,
the
the
seat of
remnants
the
of,
empire was.
like old roadways and stuff. Yeah.
And it's kind of like this transition point, like, you know, beyond here there'd be monsters kind of vibe, where it's like the Courier Brigade will probably meet you there and say like, hey, if you go any further down this road, like you're getting into some danger territory.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we had one idea where it was like a meteor impact that left a crater.
Right.
So to
right.
be
Yeah,
in a
I'm
future
hoping-
episode.
I'm hoping that that comes back in the future. There's
Yeah.
so I think we had to cut, and I don't know if we talked about this a little bit. We cut 3 or 4 locations that were fully written and developed, like fully completed, and we had to cut them because we just didn't have space.
Yeah. I mean,
The book was just getting so big.
It is a gigantic book.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot. But I mean, I think the stuff that's in there is kind of the distilled essence, you know. So it's like the really key. I mean, it's all good. It's just like, okay, not this much frosting on the cake, you know. It's like,
Yeah.
save that for another cake. So
That we say like all the time. Like the idea of Obojima, you're basically putting out these like plot points, right? Of just like, this is what Obojima is tonally and the vibe. And then the idea is, you know, hopefully you be able to craft things that would slot right into it, right?
Yeah.
As at your own table. So those are things that I think are, the Gale Fields for sure. I think that's also like one of the first real, like tests as an adventurer going into the Gale Fields. And so I think that deserves some more attention.
yeah.
And Mount Orbora is another way to take that. I mean, if you're going basically from west to east, and you know, Obojima as a setting becomes, you know, harsher and more difficult to navigate the further east you go. Mount Orbora and Gale Fields are in the same, you know, area essentially. If you're going east to west or west to east. And so Mount Orbora being another place where adventures happen in a totally different vibe than the Gale Fields. And I think those two locations would be fun to dig into more. Like what is in the mountain, right? Are there caverns and things like that? Dwarves. It'd be really fun to kind of dig into that.
Well, we had chatted about like the possibility of like having supplement books, like say an 80-page supplement book of just Mount Orbora. This is a book about Mount Orbora, and just do the deep dive.
Yeah.
Have maps and dungeons stuff and whatever, and then here's Gale Fields. Here's a book on the Gale Fields, and just like, you know, that'd be a cool thing, because there's so much going on in each of these places, and each one has its own distinct sort of feeling and kind of its own distinct like way to play. If you're, you know, a DM and you're wanting sort of like a more chill game that's more cozy, then it's like, then you can buy the Gift of Shiratashi book, you know, and just like, oh, here's a bunch of stuff that is all around this style of playing, you know, Obojima D&D, and you do that. But if you're like, no, I want peril and combat and, harrowing monsters and scary stuff, like here's the Blackwater Wetlands book. Okay, let's do it.
It also makes like a good, almost like a starter intro to the space, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna pick this up. I'm gonna play. I'm gonna pick this up. I'm gonna play in the Get to Shiratashi, and then when my party's ready to move on, I'm gonna buy the full book. Buy the full book and maybe a couple other of these like location sections or something.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, makes me think of like a starter set. Like if we, did a starter set for Obojima, like, is it like a Gift to Shiratashi, or is it a Gale Fields, or is it a Mount Arbora? Like they're all different facets of the Obojima jewel, shall we say?
If you were to see, turn it on the audience here. If you were to see, if you wanted a starter kit for Obojima, what would it include? Yeah. Right? Because I think most starter kits now. Did you guys work on the starter kits?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I they kind of like do a general. They like, I think if I remember correctly, they put like 5 pages to be like, here's the lay of the land, and then they get straight into adventure. And they give like a lot of maps and stuff like that. So, with the starter kit, are you wanting a here's the lay of the land and then straight into adventure, and then it's like a pretty decent, 30-page adventure, 40-page adventure, or what does a starter kit look like to you? What do you want included in there?
Like a starter kit for something like Obojima that has like settings that have a strong point of view that's different from other D&D settings. I think there has to be something that allows all the players, including the DM, to share the same imaginary space, right? So you have to, I think, find ways to get people to do that quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like just out of, without thinking about it more than right now, but I think there's something there that has to be kind of like a little primer for all the players to just get a sense of the place. And maybe that is built into, if let's say, I don't know, what's a good place to start in...
like Okiri?
Yeah, I guess Okiri. Yeah, Okiri is, obviously that is the starting location, right? Yeah. So Okiri is a great place there. If you were to build something in to give a real strong sense of place there and why people should care about Okiri, because, as we always talk about, like, if you can get people to care about Okiri, make it feel like home, and then you imperil Okiri,
done.
You've done it. And you can start to... I think if we're really deliberate about what aspects of Obojima do we want to unfurl, we can do that throughout the course of play in a starter in a starter set. So you introduce the concept of Okiri, and maybe right off the bat there's shenanigans with spirits. So you get a sense of how spirits are fully integrated into Obojiman society, right? So that it's not this like distance between. It's not this. The mystery of Obojima isn't like what's the deal with spirits. It's spirits are part of society, right? And so you kind of bake that into the starting adventure, and then you kind of go from there.
The other thing is like, having DM screens, like with forward-facing art, that shows sort of those kinds of scenes. Like if you had that in your starter set, it's like, okay, this comes with a screen, and it's got, for the DM, all these kinds of Ojima-centric, and how it differs as a, for like just like a traditional D&D game, this is how Obojima differs. But on the other side is like all this artwork, and then like cool little things that you can kind of put, like, oh, you see this, or you go to the Gale Fields and you see this, and just like
I think having a lot of like visuals is important for Obojima.
Very important.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's cool.
Well, not to cut off, but I also want to jump into some Q&A questions here too. So let me pull out the phone. And jump into some of these. I'll start with some of the easier ones, and then we'll lead into some of the more
prickly
the ones with
pears.
a little more meat to them. While we're talking about spirits, why didn't you include more information about the spirit realm? I'd love to see and learn more about it, but it's pretty baseline in the current book. Do you plan on putting more in future products? Yes.
Yes. And yes.
I think I'll throw in my 2 cents, and then you guys can cook on that. Cool. So we had planned originally to do a lot more in the spirit realm, and then it ended up being that we found that, as we're making these locations and these things, 3 pages just doesn't it's a lot. I mean, it covers the basis, but it's just hard to really go into detail. And I think for me, I felt like it was really going to be rough to try to detail the entire spirit realm in such a small portion. And so I'd rather push it to a book where we have more space to dedicate to it.
It's another world.
It's a full other. It's a completely
world.
Different world.
Yeah,
it's a different setting. I think it's interesting because I'm wondering if First of all, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. That obviously it warrants its own
book.
Its own book, basically, right? Or it's a big section of a book because there's so much going on there, and because it's not recognizable out of hand. Like if I say this is a medieval fantasy world, if I just say that, we're playing a role-playing game in a medieval fantasy world. Okay, I understand technology level. I understand basically how society is structured. Physics. Yep. And if there's anything that is different, that will be, described to me by the DM. Okay? But I already have the sense. With a spirit world, you have to do a lot of like foundational work, even at the table. And so when I think about the spirit world, anything that's in Obojima, it's how is this going to be used at the table, and not simply read as I just want to know about it, right? There's not just information for me to understand more about the world of Obojima, which of course is also fun to just read about this world. I get it. But everything in this book is essentially meant to be played at the table. And so for the spirit, if we're talking about, the spirit realm, we want to make sure that we're giving it all the attention it deserves so that it can be used fully at the table. So the book Obojima, while it refers to the spirit realm, it refers to spirits, we also wanted to make sure that the world, the physical world, is interesting, and that it's not the existence of the spirit realm that is proximal to that world that is what makes this place interesting. The Obojima itself is independently interesting. And if you want to dig into that, please do that. If you want to dig into the spirit, like how going into the spirit realm, go for it. And you can develop that as you will at the table. But I think that where am I going with this? I feel like I've lost my train of thought here. But I think that there's something to be said about making the spirit realm usable at the table, but also not totally known, if that makes sense. So
I see what you're saying.
This is a thing that if we're going to do the spirit realm, we have to give enough for players to understand what it is to Obojimans. What do people of Obojima know about the spirit realm? Mm-hmm. Then what do DMs need to run something in the spirit realm?
Yep.
That's a different ask. Mm-hmm. And then what are the mysteries about this place? So because if the spirit realm is completely knowable, what makes it interesting, I think, is somewhat diminished.
There's like the question of like, why do you adventure there?
Yep. That's also
why do I want to not adventure on the physical realm of Obojima? Why do I now want to go into the spirit realm? And then, like you were saying, it's like, now if I go into the spirit realm because there's a reason to adventure there, how is it different gameplay wise at just the game of D&D? So metaphysically, spells might work different here. Mm-hmm. Your skills might be different, all that kind of stuff. So you have, and that takes a lot of thought and a lot of development.
I also think there's like a unique culture different to, spirits on the physical realm. They've kind of taken up the culture of Obojimans. Yeah. I think there's a unique culture within the spirit realm that also needs defining.
And also it has to flavorfully occupy, like, the whole thing about Obojima is it's like this sort of leisure fantasy. It's a little bit cozy on one side and a little bit more perilous on the other side. But generally, it's sort of that Ghibli, Miyazaki, Zelda kind of feel. And then the spirit realm has to occupy similar space, but yet be different enough from the physical realm that it's actually, there is that difference feeling. You're like, oh, okay, I'm in a different world, but it's not, it doesn't go into like grim, scary, like spooky dark fae. It's whatever this spirit realm is. Is it like, kind of like Spirited Away, where everything's twilight and everything's lit by lanterns and things can fade in and out of existence. Like, how substantial are things Can you hit a spirit with a club in the spirit realm, or can it just like?
And that's also contrasted though in using Spirited Away as the example. The physical world is mundane.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. There's no the physical world is not the magical place, other than you can transition into the spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked about this. This happened a lot when we were working on the Feywild and Wild Beyond the Witchlight.
Yep.
How do you make that place magical when you contrast it to the material world of baseline Dungeons and Dragons, which is already magical and fantastical, right? So when you're talking about Spirited Away, the regular world is mundane. So we have to figure out how the spirit realm is different in kind from the material. Why do we talk about why spirits leave and that they can come and go? Most of the time, spirits can come and go, but we also know that the demons are spirits that have basically been exiled from the spirit realm. So that says something about the point of view of how spirits see the material. That is it kind of like a
place where we put our demons?
Yeah, it's strange, right? It says something about it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there that warrants, I think, the proper attention and an entire bestiary.
Yeah.
Right. There's a whole thing you can do.
Spells.
Magic items. Just that. So.
And so with that, I will say to answer the original question, which is why didn't you include it?
Sorry.
It was you would have had a 600-page book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to not have a 600-page book, but we're going to include spirits.
Yeah.
It's coming. We just didn't have the space.
Yeah.
And we know where we're going. At the moment, we gave what we had, what we could.
And I love that there's, whoever wrote that question, I love that they did it, you know, because it's like they're saying, hey, there's more here. Yes, totally.
And it's interesting.
And it's interesting, so.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I love it.
So let's jump on some other ones. Let's try to get through some of these. Why no artificers? We can't. We're not allowed to. That is owned. That is not within our wheelhouse to be able to create because it's not within the SRD of D&D. I believe
What's the SRD?
Well, the SRD is the document that allows us to create content for Wizards of the Coast's Dungeons and Dragons game system. And because we're producing products for Dungeons and Dragons, the SRD guides what we're actually allowed to use.
Yeah.
And so in that list, it says you can make content for fighters and wizards and druids and all of those things. Artificer is not included. I believe that's owned by Keith Baker, or not Keith Baker, but the
it's in the Eberron,
who was produced by Keith Baker. I don't think Keith Baker owns,
but he doesn't know. He doesn't.
But it's owned within that space, so it's not available to the public for creation.
Yeah, Keith Baker is the spiritual
creator
of that.
Exactly.
So
also another Portland person.
I did not know that.
I did not know that either.
Keith Baker lives in Portland.
Shout out to Keith Baker. He is a good dude.
They are good dudes. Yeah. They also do other board games. I don't know why I'm shouting out Keith Baker so much. They're great. That being said, that's why we couldn't do it. But I think that transitions into another thing. And then the next question, which is why D&D? So D&D has constraints. Why are you using D&D? And into a bigger, some of the other questions that were kind of tying into this were why not Pathfinder, or why not a different system, or why not create your own? And so there's a couple answers. Some of them are going to be more business oriented, and some of them are going to be, more, I don't know, I guess more personal, whatever the best is. But the way I looked at it when I came up with the concept is, if you want to look in the business side, people play D&D. D&D is the most popular system in the world. And yes, there are other content systems. There are other systems that you could use that are popular, but they will never be as popular as D&D. And so when making a product, I need to make a product that's going to a market that's robust and people like. That's the business side. To get rid of the business side, I love D&D. I've always loved D&D. D&D's been the game I've been playing for over a decade. It's the game I know the most about. I can make D&D content, and I know I can, and I do a decent job at it, right? And all my friends play D&D, and all of the community around me plays D&D. So that's the content I wanted to create. Do I feel like I could make my own system? Yes. But I would rather make content for a system that I know and love and that I know people will play. Before I knew how big Obojima was going to be, I just wanted to make something that I thought people would play, and D&D is the easiest path to get people to play your product.
Totally.
And so I was like, I want someone to enjoy this with me, and if I tell them, hey, you're going to have to spend a long time learning how to play this new system, because that's the other thing with new systems is you have to make them feel really unique, because otherwise people will go, why didn't you make D&D? And I think in our game space or in our current space, that forces people to be extra overcomplicated, to have that core unique system that makes them their own thing. And I just didn't want that. I just wanted to make cool stuff to put in D&D. And so there are constraints, but I think constraints also lead to really great ideas. I think without obstacles in my way, I wouldn't have been able to make some of the amazing products I've made over the years. And I'm sure obstacles in your guys' path have also led to incredible creations. But that's my thought process. If you guys want to add to that, you're more than welcome to. But
that's sort of how I've thought about it, and how everybody I've talked to who makes content for D&D has talked about it. People like Ghostfire and MT Black, and they all just like, yep, we could make our own system, and we tinker with our own stuff on the side, but for the community, like if I'm going to produce something for a community that already exists, it's like the biggest community is the D&D 5e community. So
yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of folks who, or at least my understanding is, who are coming to Obojima who don't play RPGs, and it's the setting that has been the appeal, which is really cool. But I think for a lot of people who play RPGs, they already have the core books, for D&D. Like, this is a game they're familiar with. So the heavy lift is getting into the right mind space to play in Obojima as a setting. Because if you're developing your own system, first of all, it takes a lot to develop a system. It's not, it is a heavy lift, as I think most people understand. And so there's the other reason there of just like D&D exists. 5e is a well put together system, and if it's not your favorite, it's not your favorite, and you can take information in Obojima because it is a box of ideas, and you can use whatever system works. Like, if all these systems are metaphors for what's happening in the world, use the system you want to use. But we developed against D&D because most people know it, and I think most people have a good time playing the game. I love it.
And also, like, if you were like, I'm playing Tiny Dungeon, or I'm playing Shadow Dark, or a different kind of system that's very similar to D&D, it's like you can still take Obojima and just map it to it. In fact, it's easy to do it because Obojima is kind of like, this is a style of story you want to tell. So if you're like, I don't play 5e, or I've been playing this other system, it's like, awesome, you could Pathfinder it. It's like you could do that as well. So it's
like, especially the rules light systems, like if you have like easy D6 or anything like that, I think Obojima would port over quickly and in a satisfying way.
So systems, it's like really you can move things like an IP like Obojima, you can move it to pretty much any system.
So then another question that we've had is, are there plans to port Obojima, an official Obojima port, to a new system? And the answer on that is maybe. Currently, it's not in our plan, but I also don't want to say outright no, because I don't think that's true. Like, if there's an opportunity in the future where we think that's the best move, I think right now it's time management on us. We don't have a lot of time to do a bunch of projects, so we're going to do the things that we think are the best. But if we have the time in the future and if there's a demand within our community, why not?
Yeah.
So
it's not a big team.
It's not a big team. You're looking at a big portion of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so then let's get into some of these other ones here. I'm gonna delete some of these questions off my phone so I don't try to reread them. Why were Venomous Rex and the Drumbelly left out?
Why?
They're mentioned.
Why?
Okay, hold on. I'm feeling attacked now.
Yeah, Jeremiah.
They were mentioned throughout the book, but they never made it in, at least not stat blocks. Why is that? Are we going to see them in future projects? Yes. And I'm sorry. Okay, so Venomous Rex, the stat blocks for Venomous Rex and the stat blocks for the Drumbelly were going to be in the book. That was the plan. I had made space for them. I left room for them and Jesus. And it came down to maybe not the most satisfying answer to some people, but it came down to art. I had a couple pieces illustrated for these characters, and I just wasn't satisfied with them. I know some people might think like you get an art piece and you go, this is perfect, and you toss it in the book. But at least for a big portion of my job is working with the artists, and there's a non-zero amount of art pieces that just got cut and never got put in the book because they didn't, not to say that they weren't bad. All of these artists are incredibly talented, so they're sending me amazing stuff. But for some reason, it didn't fit in line with the style of Obojima, or it just, maybe it fit in line with the style, but it didn't fit, I guess, like the feeling I wanted that character to invoke. Like a good example of this is we had an art piece of the Lionfish King. We have 2 illustrations of the Lionfish King. The first one that we illustrated just didn't feel threatening enough. Like he felt very like a goober. He also felt very small.
Yeah.
And I was like, he is a goober, but in a way where
threatening goober.
He's an imperious goober.
He's the type of person who says threats to you, but like some of them are hollow, right?
Yeah.
And you can tell. But this person just felt like you'd push him down the stairs and he'd make a bunch of like slide whistle noises.
Floppity, floppity, floppity.
Right? Like he just was not very cool. And so I just like, I can't do this. We had it re-illustrated. But the issue I had is as we were getting close to the end of the line where I needed this book completed, I just was like, hey, I don't have the time to have these re-illustrated.
Yeah.
I need to move on to another thing. I went through a lot of iterations on these characters and it just wasn't coming out. I think the best move is, let's call this piece done and we're going to move on to the next thing. And then when it came down to it, when I looked at it, I just said, both of these characters for now are just going to be story plot beats without stats. And if you want to stat them up, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah.
There will be official stats later down the line. I just couldn't include it at this point.
And we, when Ari and I were like working on like Magic the Gathering, and we would have this thing, we do a thing what we call the art wall, and every Thursday we'd come up to the wall and just see what all the concept artists done. And it's interesting as you're developing a world, and in this case like an IP, after a while you start to see you see a whole wall of art and you can kind of go, that looks like it fits in this world. That looks like it fits in this world. And then you're like, that doesn't fit in this world.
Right. It's cool, but not right.
It's cool. But it could fit totally in another world. And some of that might be just what the monster looks like. Some of it could be what the costuming a character's wearing. Some of it is just art style. Like, you've got like the Simpsons art style, and then you've got something like an anime art style. Mm-hmm. And if you took a Simpsons character, totally cool in the Simpsons world, put it in the anime world, and you're like, it doesn't work. It's like, so stylistically, so all these vectors have to make sense for it actually to get in. And it's something that I think in Obojima, it's still developing, but it's pretty much there. Like we had a discussion the other day, and you're like, I think I found what the art style, like that, I know what it is now.
Can you talk to what the process was of, generating an art description, commissioning an artist, going through rounds of feedback until it got to finish. And then by the end, like you're scrambling to finish a bunch of, assets at the same time. Yeah, it's like what is that process for each piece that went into this book?
Yeah. So, for each illustration, I have to sit down and I have to come up with a generalized description of the character. Oftentimes I give what I call as like I say about the scene or about the character or about the whatever, and it doesn't have to do with the scene at all or the character. I'm giving the artist in-world information where it's like, in a character it might be like, Akiko is a little girl and she likes to explore the area and she has a little spirit companion. And she's rough around the edges, and her grandparents who run a local tea shop are always upset with her because she'll go out into the woods and she'll get rough and dirty trying to find ingredients, which she sells to buy potions. And then she uses those potions to get into like weird spots and explore the city and blah, 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 blah. And so I give flavor for the artist. And then I say, in this scene, now that they know that, I say, in this scene, Akiko is sitting on a park bench, and she's like looking off and she's like petting her spirit companion or whatever. And, and then I say things like she was just out to, in the woods. So like maybe, make her hair a little messy and she has some mud on her knees or something like that. And then I have to go and find an example of that pose because I need the artist to understand what I'm looking for, at least something similar. I need to find an example of clothing, at least a couple pieces where it's like, you don't need to copy this, but here's the general vibe of what she might be wearing. If it's in a scene, I have to give examples of like the area and the foliage and things like that. I might give like some other general directions like on lighting and stuff like that. And then at the very end, I try to give a description of the feeling I'm trying to invoke, which is like she feels exhausted but happy or whatever, right? Or this scene should feel like, when you look at it, it's like colorful but melancholy, or it's like there's a lot going on but the main character's focus is like just sad or maybe bored or something like that, right? So, and I give all of those bits of information and then I send it off and I get a sketch back. And then usually I have to take it and very poorly draw over it in Photoshop and send back more for like notes. And then we do that back and forth. And then maybe colors come in and I'll do color adjustments and send that back and forth until eventually it's a final piece.
What's the turnaround time usually until you get to final?
On a single piece, usually on a character, sometimes like a week. Mm-hmm. On a scene, it could be up to 3 weeks.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Or longer. Now, what I often do in these art briefs is I'll do art briefs in chunks. So I'll say, like, here's an art brief. It has 2 characters, 4 scenes, and 2 objects. And then the artist, what that does for the artist is as they're waiting for feedback on me, it lets them start working on the next illustration. Yeah. Alternatively, I've been told by artists, some pieces are really fun and some pieces are grueling. And so they're like, okay, this is going to be a grueling scene. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do a bunch of fun stuff to like give myself something to go, like, so like to refresh my battery. And so then I'm doing that for like an 8 artists at a time all the time where I'm constantly giving feedback and sending them over. And so, when it was coming to the end of the book, I was like, I'm going to give you a note. I'm going to give you one note. If you can't, I'm going to give you a set of notes. If you can't fix it, like if they send it back and it needs another round of notes, it's not worth pursuing. We need to cut this from the book and move to the next thing because otherwise I'm going to miss deadlines. And I could kind of do that early on where I'm like, the deadline's really far off. We'll
have
figure
all
it
the
out.
time.
And then as it got to the end, I was like, I can't do this right now.
And that is the thing about bookmaking is like, as the deadlines come, the sword comes out and you have to do the hacking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's already a really big book.
Yep.
Like I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
That being said, Venomous Rex and the Drumbelly will return. They will have their limelight.
And they will be glorious.
They will be glorious.
They will bask in glory. Especially Venomous Rex.
Yes.
He definitely deserves some glory.
Well, okay, so technically our time is done, but there's a few questions I want to get in here. So we're gonna power through some
Let's
cleric
do it.
questions.
Oh, I love it.
And then I have one last
Cleric.
question.
What's controversial there?
Yeah. What? Isn't
Okay.
it all smooth and everybody's happy with that?
3 questions in one. Why didn't you use Shintoism for clerics as their source of power? Why didn't you use spirits as cleric's source of power? And if you were forced by knife point to include a cleric in the book, what would you do? And we'll try to be very brief with these because we're towards the end. So I think I can handle the spirit one. That's low hanging fruit, and then I'll let you two handle the others. The reason we didn't want spirits to be the source of power. We didn't want spirits to be the source of power in Obojima for clerics is because we don't want spirits, elder spirits or any spirit, to be viewed as gods. That's not what we wanted. We didn't, like the slippery slope is that elder spirits become godlike and worshipers, offer them these things and it becomes like this, it becomes a religion. We're trying to pull back on religion and the form of worship within the space. And we didn't want elder spirits to fit in that. That's not how we saw them in Obojima, and that's not our goal. There are practices and traditions like Jumaga has a ledge of offering for blessings and things like that. And there is a belief system within that, but it is not to the point of like dedicated religion.
It's also not making a statement that Jumaga is a god.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jumaga kind of doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like people are doing what they're doing, but Jumaga's just like living in a totally different world. So.
And I think you can also kind of see the trajectory that Jumaga holds where it's like people probably offered cows first.
Yeah.
And then after a while, maybe through cultural growth and like history and maybe the meaning behind it kind of shifting, people would leave like coins.
Yeah.
And like Jumaga doesn't care about coins, but now it's tradition and it's part of the culture of Doran and other places similar. And so like you can kind of see where that forms. What we don't want is definitive, like this cleric does this thing, blah, 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 blah. Now, why it works for warlocks is because warlocks aren't saying all spirits are gods and we worship them. Warlocks are signing a contract with a spirit and borrowing the power from them. It's a different statement. And so that's why we decided we don't want elder spirits to be the source, or spirits in general to be the source of clerics, because that's not what we wanted them to be. There you go. It was a choice. So then the next one is, why not Shintoism? Why didn't we use Shintoism? Or I guess a bigger question too was, people fairly pointed out like, hey, there are more religions than Western religions, and like Catholicism and Christianity and all of that, which is kind of what clerics are based off of.
Yeah.
Why not use one of those religions? And I'll start again with my sentence, but it'll pass it on to you, which is like, I think the prerequisite of clerics is very like, it is focused on Western religion. So that's kind of why we talked about it a lot. But then I think Ari and Adam both made good points, which is we don't want to just steal Shintoism and put it into the thing. That's not what we wanted.
I mean, even taking something that was inspired by, Shintoism, like, I mean, first of all, yeah, we didn't want to just bring Shintoism in, but even like a construct like Shintoism, where there's like, an animistic worldview that everything has kind of spirits and stuff like that, but they're revered, was counter to the world we were building with how spirits are integrated into the world of Obojima. That the people of Obojima interact with spirits in a very casual way, generally speaking. And so it didn't quite fit with how Obojima is structured, at least in the book. If that's a direction you want to take for Obojima in your gameplay, that this is how people see the world there, that's fine. But the way that we thought about it, and we'd had many conversations about the concept of what is the place of spirits, how awe-inspiring are they versus how mundane are they in the eyes of the average Obojiman, right? And what we came to was there was something really charming about being in a place like Okiri Village or, Yadaman, and then spirits are their residents there. They just live among everybody else, and you can interact with them in kind of mundane ways, but to the player, it's not mundane. It's super charming, right? And that's one of the things that makes it unique. The moment you start adding the layer of worship to it, or even reverence, it changes the dynamic of the relationship between the people who live in Obojima and the spirits who also live there. And so that was, we found that interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like the, like sort of the thing with the Eladrin. Like you're an angel person. It's just in D&D. It's like there's just like now all of a sudden it's just like, okay, that character kind of becomes
the Azmar
or the Azmar, yeah.
The Eladrin are the angels.
Yeah, but it's like like an Azmar. It's like it's just it's just like I'm now an angel character, and it's just so in the sort of what kind of what you're saying, like all of a sudden now there's a celestial host that they're up on Mount Celestia, and now I'm playing a character that is kind of descended from them. It's just a little weird with like the idea that there are gods and some clerics worship those gods. So, but by kind of mundanifying spirits, that they're just another part of the society, it keeps that kind of dynamic.
And to say that they're mundane doesn't mean that they're uninteresting. It means that
not mysterious.
Or not mysterious, right?
Yeah.
It just means that the world of Obojima is saturated with this stuff to the point, but it's not necessarily. It wasn't necessary to include that sense of reverence for it, because we also don't want to step on Shintoism, right? Like intentionally so.
Yeah.
So those are reasons we went in those directions.
Yeah.
And again, yeah.
And then the last question there was like, okay, you have to throw a cleric in. What are we doing? Now, I think Ari mentioned a cleric idea that I thought was kind of interesting, but to throw my so I don't have to necessarily say it. We were talking about, well, just if you would like to play cleric in Obojima, do it. Go for it. You can do
absolutely.
You can do any of them, and to kind of connect with a concept that one of the comments from the cleric episode said was like, what if you're like, if you're using Shintoism or whatever as your baseline for a cleric in Obojima, and they're like the temple maiden or some sort, I think you could just pick the domain of light cleric, and that could be like you're the lighter of incense at temples or shrines or something like that within Obojima, and it just naturally fits within that space, and you're more than welcome to do that. Like I think that's where I would start, with just picking a cleric that you like.
Yeah.
And then pulling it into the game, and figuring out where it naturally fits within the Obojima space.
Which is always the case with all settings.
Yeah.
Every time.
D&D is your game. You get to make it whatever you want to make it.
I think if I had to make a cleric, I think the direction that's the most compelling to me is when you look at clerics, and they have like traditionally been against like undead, right? There's like turn undead, and there's this whole quality of that like fighting against that kind of unnatural supernatural evil aspect. I think what we have demons as a kind of a stand-in for that, as a sense for being something that kind of is abominable, to the spirit realm, and and then they are
causing problems.
The idea of putting skewing or creating a cleric that is about putting them against demons, I think is a fun way to do it, or mollifying spirits in some way. We talk about Mushishi as an influence, some like Mushi Master style cleric could be fun. And then in terms of like the source of power, I think the idea from our earlier podcast about domains and things like that if in the spirit, if we wanted to connect it to the spirit realm, that the idea that these domains might be like metaphysical spaces within the spirit realm, and that's where they're drawing power from. But in terms of gameplay, I would definitely put the cleric in the anti-demon kind of bent, make them kind of like the demon hunter cleric. I think would be really fun.
And I think I would have either thought along those same lines, like demon hunters, or my favorite anime is Mushishi. Like, and if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's great.
Stop watching the podcast.
Yeah, stop watching it right now. But yeah, I would do like Mushi Masters. Like, there are pesky spirits that, and like dust bunnies we started to create, but I think we could actually flesh out even more like what are pest spirits like.
Or when a place becomes haunted by a spirit and stuff like that, like and what that means,
or like just too many pest spirits living in one spot, and they start to actually create a problem in like society. And that would be when they bring in this person, this Mushi Master, this cleric that actually deals with the spirit realm. And it's not necessarily like the old version of D&D where it's like smiting stuff. Like, I come in to smite things, or I come in to destroy undead, but they're actually coming in a more sort of Shinto-esque way, or a more Obojiman way, like where it's like bringing balance. They're like, something's gone off of balance. Yeah. And so these people would come in, and these characters would come in and bring balance through their spells and through their sort of how they deal with it. And they take the spirits and move them back to their home, and then they save the town, because now the town can live in harmony, or the town needs to do something to live in harmony with the spirits, or the town's done something to cause the imbalance. So there's a lot of like story role playing that can take place in that. That would be sort of where I would go.
I really love that. Cool. To add on, something that didn't click for me that is interesting within the space is you kind of talked about this metaphysical realm that you're drawing power from, and for some reason in my head I imagined it as like a giant gourd in the spirit realm, like this humongous. You couldn't see it, maybe you could see it, but like it's this giant gourd that the source of power is almost represented by like a honey wine or something that sits in it, and as the cleric takes it, they draw from this, and it is a finite source.
Like ambrosia.
It's like you're almost like you're pulling from it to balance out the world, but like you are also like, I could see a conflict in the space is like clerics will, like these people, if we were doing, let's say we're building up this space and they're balancing nature,
this is all hypothetical.
They're balancing nature. They're these people, maybe they fit in both spaces, where it's like maybe they're dealing with pest spirits and they're trying to bring balance and harmony, or maybe they're stopping demons, and it's kind of this connection, and they're drawing from the source, and that source is running out.
Do you see it in terms of when I use it and I spend it, it's gone, or it's finite, and then when I expend a spell, then it replenishes? You see what I'm saying? Is it this exchange?
It's hard to say. Yeah. I don't know.
I like the replenishing. I feel like if it's in nature,
you're borrowing.
Like, nature replenishes itself. But if you were greedy and we take too much from nature, nature will go out of balance, and you can actually destroy it.
It reminds me of
interesting.
Yeah, it reminds me kind of like the ancient Japanese kind of Greek storytelling that we did with the Wandering Forest, and maybe that character, where it feels very like
Mulgrotha.
Yeah, like this like tale,
the crow spirit.
This tale of like sorrow, and like there's like this kind of like duality thing.
Yeah,
like you could almost imagine. I don't know. There's almost like, you could almost be like, there's this metaphysical plane that exists that was represented by a gourd with a snake piercing its fangs into it, and the snake is drinking all the nectar, and the cleric bringing balance is filling the gourd back up.
Yeah.
And it's just like this thing that these people bring balance, and that's what it's interesting. I don't know. There's something.
My brain would not have gotten there, but there's something really fascinating about that.
Yeah, I don't. You opened it for me.
I like that it's
your
abstractified.
description. Yeah.
It's like it's these weird symbolic things.
I also just love, if you were to if you were to indulge this concept of cleric,
People are gonna be like, "You gotta do it."
Yeah.
just the idea of also like the top down concept of religious figures or whatever with wine or brewing, and this idea of these kind of metaphysical gourds being filled with this thing. And so I can imagine like having things that are anointed with fermented with liquor basically in some way. So there's something really fun there that you can do. The idea of clerics that are walking around with these giant gourds is kind of cool.
That's cool.
So you're getting like
That's
physical you're getting visual kind of affectations around them. So I think that's something that actually I want to talk more about that because it's really
cool. It's almost like
sometimes you die a hero, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
It makes me think of
clerics are in book 2, baby.
It's happening. I mean, it makes me think of, remember Quest for Fire?
Oh yeah.
And how, like, you're in these Stone Age people, and the ember from the fire is super important, and they're trying to keep it alive as they're traveling and following the herd. These clerics could be holding these gourds, and it's this sacred, like, it's part of this whole, but there's only a limited amount of it, and this is
you
very
have to borrow
valuable
from it, and then return.
And you're drawing your power from it, and you're casting spells, but it starts to diminish, and you only have so much. But then you've got to go refill it by, I don't know, going to the spirit realm and then doing some sacred stuff, and then you get more from the gourd. But every time you go to the gourd,
rituals.
it might be going down.
Rituals.
Yeah. So, more to be continued.
It's also just in general interesting take on spell casting, like mana in general.
It's a battery,
right?
Yeah.
It's a battery, and people say your battery refreshes after taking a nap, but it's like, no, I have my magic in this gourd, and I need to fill it again.
And maybe that's kind of Obojima's or this game's version of like what prayer would be to a normal cleric, like the devotion and all that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fascinating. Like, again, this goes back to the earlier question about why D&D. So like, this is how do you then translate this into a spell slot system, right? Yeah. So we have a lot of conversations, but I think I think there's something fascinating there.
Let's chat about maybe a cleric episode in the future.
I think so.
Another cleric episode.
Until then, refill your gourd, my friend.
We really should end it, but I do want to.
The puck of time.
The puck of time's so dead right now.
It's so dead.
The last question is timeline for new projects. Is there new projects coming? Yes. Why, yes, there is. So, in this stage, we're kind of in this hurry up and wait moment where the creative team, or where the book is being fulfilled and that's all happening, but the creative team is not held by those constraints. Those shackles do not bind us. And so we are working on the next big and great thing. That being said, I think we want a little more time to develop something. And so we've got a project coming out that I think everyone's going to be excited about.
Yeah.
Later this year. I'm not going to give an exact date, but we have some stuff. Maybe you can. Let's just say we've been talking about some of these things on the podcast, so maybe you can connect some ideas on what's going to be coming up here, right? So we've got that later this year, and then the plan is another very large project for Obojima in 2026. Maybe a couple big projects in 2026. Who's to say right now?
I'm going to say something, and if it's not the time, cut this.
Okay.
Have you talked about Free RPG Day?
Oh, yeah. We have not. Yeah, okay. Free RPG Day. So that's a great example.
Yeah.
Free RPG Day is coming out at a time. I don't recall. It'll be on the thing. Miles, you're in charge of figuring that out. Free RPG Day is coming out later this year, and you can pick up another adventure written by our good friend Adam, who wrote a wonderful, fun adventure. Maybe it has to do with some harpies. Maybe it has to do with some other things.
2 harpies.
That takes place...
a pair of harpies.
Yeah, takes place and maybe fleshes out a couple... fleshes out Doran a little bit better. Maybe includes Jumaga, the Sky Salamander, and some other fun things. It's a very fun adventure. It's very cute. That will be available... at physical free copies at your local game store. at some point in time. And then after that, we will be releasing it for free for everyone for digital download.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to release it before the event goes live. So
Go to your game store.
Go to your game store, try to find it. But if you can't get it, no worries. It will be available for you. And so, yeah, that's coming out later. That is something I can confirm. Good remembering on that. With all that being said, we will announce more on the timeline. And when we get some more official dates and things like that, we'll start telling you about it. But we have some really cool things. Stuff that I think people are going to be really excited about. We're working on a lot of big stuff right now. And it's all Obojima. It's all Obojima. The focus is making cool stuff for Obojima. And so that's what we're doing. And it's good. It's very good. So
Fun stuff.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you are satisfied with some of our answers and got to hear a little bit on Ari's takes on the book. And join us next week for another podcast episode.
And keep asking questions.
Discord, Instagram, TikTok, and some other things. YouTube. Spotify.
Yeah.
You can check us out on all of those places. This was the Obojima Podcast.
Episode 50.
Episode 50.
Episode 50, yeah.
Oh my gosh. 100 will be even crazier. 100 will have to do something nuts.
Oh, yeah, we have to
Shoot
do
it on location in Obojima.
Whoa,
Yeah.
on location.
An Obojima.
Maybe we can have like
we'll have our gourds
maybe
filled
a
with
free supplement or a free PDF or something to go with
Yeah.
episode 100.
I make some for that.
Who knows?
Let's
What's
a
a
year
special
from now?
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
a special number in Obojima? Maybe we can get
Sheesh.
something earlier.
we got to invent that.
Let's make a cool number. Yeah.
Let's make a cool number.
Let's make an actual Obojima holiday that's like in real world. And then let's make a religion.
And then we got clerics.
Hey! All right. Get
It's
out
all
of here.
around. Full
Thank
circle.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.